So good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Before we get started with our webinar, I just wanted to let you know that it will be recorded and it will be added to our chamber website later today. At this time, I'll ask everybody who's not currently muted to mute your microphones. And if you have any questions along the way, please add them into our chat and we'll address those at the end. So today's webinar, Options You Can Use to Interrupt the Pandemic, Fatigue, and Stress in Your Workplace, is presented by Barb Fletcher. Barb is a stress expert. She empowers individuals, teams, and organizations to develop resilience, which is the best way for them to stay productive, focused, and physically, emotionally well. Her 35-year career as a senior leader for the province of New Brunswick gave her a firsthand view of stress and inspired her to take action. She is a certified HeartMath trainer and coach. She spends her time working virtually across North America during these COVID times. An entrepreneur at heart, she appreciates the challenges faced during this uncertain period and creates individualized solutions which fit your business. Barb lives just outside of Fredericton with her husband. Family, gardening, and learning are her pastimes and bring her joy. Please join us in welcoming Barb this morning.
Good morning, everyone. Can everybody hear me? I guess. Wendy, am I coming through okay?
Yes, you are.
Okay, perfect. Well, first, I want to say thank you to you all for taking time this morning to spend with me. And on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce, I really appreciate them hosting this opportunity. So as Wendy mentioned, my name is Barb Fletcher, and I help organizations and teams experiencing stress. She also mentioned that I had a long career. I worked 35 years for the province as a civil servant, and I now am fortunate enough to spend my days doing the things I love, which is helping people and organizations. My motivation came in developing this expertise was as a result of the stress that I experienced throughout my career, and ultimately took a toll on my physical side. And the line in the sand came from me when I was having a conversation with the dentist. I carry my stress in my jaw, and so I had developed TMJ, which is the grinding of the teeth. And so I had successfully um, worked my way through 3 bite planes. And at that point, he said to me, I think we now need to break your jaw and wire it shut again. And I thought, maybe it's time that I took a little bit more control of the stress that I'm carrying. So that was ultimately my motivation. So this is a quote that I found. It was from Deloitte, and you can read it. COVID proved that people and organizations are capable of tremendous growth under the pressure of a crisis. The challenge for many will be to sustain that momentum, to discover new ways to thrive in the long term, even as the disruption constantly resets the path forward. This was something actually Deloitte published in May of last year. And I really believe that the leverage that organizations are using today and on a way forward, um, as we near, looks like a line in the sand with COVID, perhaps with a vaccination, is really going to set the tone for how we move forward. And I think a lot of the things that we knew a year ago don't exist anymore. So just to talk a little bit and a little bit of background about mental health, and we know that we're hearing lots of conversations about mental health these days. I just want to link it into emotional awareness and self-regulation. to anchor it a little differently. So I don't know about you, but often when we speak about mental health, our thoughts are not usually directed to a definition that looks at the wellness side. We're often looking at the deficit. So mental health can be defined as someone's state of emotional well-being. It's the subjective feeling of contentment and life satisfaction despite the problems, challenge, and upheavals of life. So interestingly enough, Morneau Chappelle has been gathering data over the each month since the pandemic began. And if you're interested, you can find each of their reports on their website. Not only do they have reports for Canada, but they also have reports for other countries in the world. So you can actually see how we compare and how we stack up. What's really intriguing about their data that they gather is that there are often individual nuggets about how people and organizations are doing during this time. And it doesn't look the same over the course of the last year. In fact, one of the previous ones, probably in November, there was a high percentage of people they talk about. Here we're saying that a third of the individuals reported wanting to focus on their mental health. But what we saw in a previous report was a high degree of individuals who would not seek out healthcare. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. So the other things here I've got are individuals between 20 and 29 are nearly twice as likely to report focus on their mental health when compared to those over the age of 60. So the older folks, even though there's a sense of isolation, they seem to be doing perhaps a bit better. Managers are struggling more than non-managers, and women are 50% more likely to report worry as their primary emotion. It's throughout all of their data, women are bearing a heavy burden. It's their children in school, their caregiver role, all of the extra pressures that have been placed on them. The other score that I haven't noted here that was of significance was that the isolation score was at the lowest point since the inception of this data. The one final point to take note of is for the 8th consecutive month, full-time students have the lowest mental health score. So if you have students in your organization or if you have students at home, you're probably witnessing this. So this is the mental health index for Canada, and you can see the data takes us to January, and so I think I'll be interested to see the February data because we were getting into a bit of the second wave, but where the Maritime or Atlantic provinces are this gray line. But you can see Newfoundland has done much better, and you can see that Ontario and Alberta. So it's just, where we positioned and we know what our experience has been. So what's stress? In wanting to strengthen that mental health and well-being, we need to understand stress and how it shows up in our life. Stress is a common term we use to explain a variety of experiences we have with challenges in our lives. It's a unique experience we have based on many factors, including how our brain perceives information. What one person experiences as debilitating can actually be energizing for someone else. And two people in exactly the same situation can have a dramatically different relationship with stress over time. I bet you've had a conversation with someone telling them about this exciting experience that you had. You may have been sharing about how jazzed you were for days. You looked them in the eyes of the other person and you could see that with fear was coming over them. Maybe their body even reacted to the very same situation that you might have had. If you think about, some of those things like zip lining, for some people it's excitement, for other people they just, it's they could pass. So the key for all of this is really about us understanding our own individual stress. So you've probably also noticed that sometimes you feel energized and motivated by stress, and other times maybe you feel exhausted or burnt out from it. Perhaps you've had one of those days when everything falls into place and you say to yourself, wow, that was a great day. And then there's a day when everything seems to be a struggle and you barely get yourself home. This is regulated by how our brain is perceiving the experiences we have and how much capacity we have to cope and adjust in positive ways. In other words, if you've heard me speak about resilience, this is what our objective is. So I suspect in organizations, we're feeling probably that person on the right as opposed to energized by what's been happening. So here we've got some stress reactions. And while you may have heard these as responses, stress responses, described as fight or flight, they're really a response. They're not a response, sorry. We're not reacting. What we want to do is we want to respond to these situations. So responses are things that happen when we think logically and rationally, and we make choices using our whole brain processing. These reactions are really driven by biological experiences in our brain and body and are designed to act quickly in order to help us survive. And oftentimes they're governed by the part of the brain that may be pointing out danger. So that would be fight or flight. The freeze or faint reaction seems to be fueled more by cortisol and other chemicals in our body that were preparing us for a more long-term danger or a situation that we don't have any control over. So if we think about COVID, there are a few of us who are feeling that freeze or faint stress reaction. The tend to befriend are reactions that seem to be more fueled by the female brain pattern with higher levels of hormones such as oxytocin or estrogen. And those are where we get perhaps into an overcare mode. So if you think about a situation where somebody's been ill, you may have gone into overcare. That can be a stress reaction as well. So the complementary set of reactions designed to help us when danger is no longer present is rest and digest, restore and recharge our energy. Although for most people, we don't spend much time here, which causes lots of our problems and results in us not being able to adapt effectively and be resilient to stress. In this state, rest and digest, where we may need to be more intentional about training our brains and our bodies to go in this state more often. And we'll talk more about how to build that resilience that we're looking for. So, what's your stress response? How do you react, and how can you think of a time recently when you reacted this way? Research has shown a dramatic difference between stress reactions that are based on acute or short-term stress versus chronic or long-term stress. So if you think about the pandemic, we've thought about the pandemic in the beginning. It was acute. Unfortunately, because there's really no end in sight, we're feeling more like that's chronic, that's in our body. In fact, this is probably the most important differentiator for us to be aware of because our perception of whether something is short or long term dramatically alters how our brain and body reacts to it. So in the beginning, we we felt that, we could do this for a little while, and but it has carried on longer and longer and longer, and people have had to experience more and more change throughout the pandemic, which has certainly drawn their energy down. We can also think of this as being a challenge stress, which is short term when we believe we have what we need to cope, or we can get the resources to help us. Or it's a threat stress, which feels like we can just get a surge of energy and overcome it. The chronic stress is really about when we don't have control over the stress. And so chronic stress we can think of as the pandemic falling into that category. So again, we're going to talk a little more about acute and chronic and what happens. So when we're in an acute stress situation, that fight or flight, we have an increase in our adrenaline, our heart rate, our blood pressure, our immune function goes up, our short-term memory improves, our focus and attention, and we're hypersensitive. So this acute stress could be, that near miss when a car accident. We can feel that we're really on it. Instead, when we have a chronic stress, we have increased cortisol, increased cardiovascular stress, more fat gets stored, our immune function goes down, our memory goes down, our focus and attention, and we become desensitized to stressors. And I always remind people, so it's our awareness to particular situations. So if you've ever thought about being in the kitchen and you turn the dishwasher on, you initially hear the dishwasher, but then it becomes a background noise. And that's really about how we become desensitized to these stressors. So we're going to look a little bit about stress, resilience, and performance. And this is a diagram that was put together by HeartMath, and I'll talk more about that as we go along. On the left-hand side, we see performance response to sustained challenge, and on the bottom, we see days. And so you can see without any change, just what we talked about there, our performance actually improves, we get more focus, and then over the longer term, we actually see our performance decreasing and perhaps even breaking down. So the uphill swing, we embrace the challenge and improve our performance. And then we're on a roll. We're at that maximum period of efficiency. And without any interventions, we find ourselves getting into a hyperreactive stage over the long term, which then leads to emotional exhaustion, which is probably what we're seeing in some of the people who are in our organizations. So this blue line is our objective. The blue line is what we want to help people do is build resilience so that they are able to sustain that performance level and not see the drop. So stress and disease, and we've probably seen some of that. The long term, again, increased cortisol, cardiovascular stress, glucose stored as fat, immune, memory, function, desensitized to stressors. And then what happens in addition to that? We make poor food choices, Perhaps our lifestyle is more sedentary, isolation, and we know that that's occurred as well as a result of the pandemic, substance abuse, insomnia, and avoidant behaviors. And I think that, we can look at all of those and see that those have over time had some presence in our lives. So it's important that we look at our relationship with stress. And to do that, we're going to look at it with three different perspectives. We're going to look at our stress load, our stress lens, and our stress signature. The more clearly you can understand your relationship with stress, the better you can make adjustments so that you can use stress to fuel positive change instead of letting it burn you out or break you down. So the stress load, your stress load is based on the demands on your resources compared to your capacities. So this little diagram looks at the amount of stress that we experience over our lifetime. And so you can see at age 30, we probably have more capacity than we do demand. And without adding any interventions to that blue line, we can see that our capacity actually declines. So there are many factors that contribute to the demand and the capacity. Some of them key factors are time, energy, money, social supports, meaning, and purpose. Stress load can also be impacted by the stimulation of technology, other environmental factors that are perceived as taking up our resources. So our stress lens. And our stress lens is really not how we see, but how our brain perceives the information it's receiving. So there's three ways that it looks at it. It looks at it from the sensing piece, which is the survival state. Am I safe? The feeling aspects of the emotional state. Am I loved? And the executive state. What can I learn from this? The thinking brain. So what happens is, as we become more and more stressed, we have less access to the executive state. Okay. So how does stress show up for you? Your stress signature is your unique signs and symptoms. And I talked to you earlier about what happens to me. Mine used to be grinding of teeth. And it can happen when stress is too intense or it continues too long and there are no interventions. The clearer that you can get about your unique patterns, the more quickly you can make adjustments when you're getting hijacked by unhealthy patterns. And so for some of us, we'll be able to see those suddenly. In my case, it was pretty dramatic. So our stress signature. So what's the first sign that you've got too much stress? Just give some thought to these questions. What symptoms start to show up for you when stress continues for too long? And is there something that you do to help with recharge and reset in the moment? So for me, first sign, if I feel a tenseness in my face, and it may occur if I've spent a lot of time in front of the screen. And for me, a reset could just be getting up and moving around, changing my focus. So the most important step in all of this is awareness. Can't change or pivot what you don't see. And once you see how stress is impacting you, it's likely you'll note behaviors and wellness that may have attributed to other causes in the past. And then you can develop a plan. And some of these things, may take a little bit of digging. They may not be on the surface. The the opportunity with the pandemic is, for many people, is that they see their stress responses more clearly than they might have before. So, how do people come together to do the work during COVID-19? So, teams became fundamental. And the reason for that is that they're able to adapt and build faster. And they're able to be more creative and able to drive growth and navigate uncertainty. So it's going to be important, and I think in many companies they've seen people do adapt and do different tasks that they might never have done before. It's going to be important to pay attention to how do we keep those teams effective moving forward. So some things to take into consideration, maybe building a strengthening communication, um, an ability to show understanding to others in their work styles, an appreciation of energy management, and that's just our own energy management, and increased resilience to navigate the ongoing change. So, the greatest predictor of resilience is our ability to be flexible. And if we have people in our organizations who have struggled with the amount of change that has occurred, then they are probably showing up more depleted than ever. So, what's the opportunity here? I believe it's to seize the pandemic reset and take well being beyond the work life balance by starting to design well being into the work and life itself. For a long time, we had well being sitting at as a standalone. And I think moving forward, an opportunity to thrive will be how do we integrate well being into work through thoughtful design? So, from my perspective, designing well being into work itself and life itself, there are a few steps. The first one, we need to assess stress levels because people don't often have language for stress. They they use the word stress, but it may be showing up as behaviors or emotions that look different than what they would believe stress to be. The second is to shift our reactions into responses. So once we quiet the brain and the nervous system, we're able to respond to situations, not react. We need to understand our energy levels. We need to establish resilience building tools as habits and ultimately create a new baseline. So, one of the tools that I use is something called Stress Mastery, and it is a psychometric that individuals can take. It takes about 10 minutes to take this online questionnaire. And what comes back is a, a reflection of their response to the questions. And it looks at warning signs, stress effects, stressors, and how they report stress in their lives. And what I've found is that people don't often understand how they're likely to react if they're stressed. So anger, people may be aware of that one, but sometimes people might not understand perfectionism as a stress response. Maybe they might not understand tension to be a stress response. Um, they may see their life work satisfaction going down, but not understand that that's being impacted by stress. This also looks at life events and hassles, which are really helpful because when it looks at life events, it looks at often they're one-time things. And so they would be more like the acute stressors, and the hassles are more like the chronic ones. Often the life events ones we have little control over, but the hassles we can actually get a plan. So this first step in determining stress levels is really helpful for people. They get a language, they get some hints and some ideas as to how to focus their attention in reducing their stress. The second is a tool Wendy mentioned at the beginning that I'm certified as a HeartMath coach and trainer, is a tool called HeartMath, and it is a tool that was developed more than 40 years ago. It has a lot of peer-reviewed science that has been tested in organizations around the world where they're able to demonstrate how organization performance improves when their people build these skills. And HeartMath is really about teaching people how to self-regulate, how to build resilience. And we do it using breath and a deeper understanding of emotions. So once you have a HeartMath skill set, you learn how to build resilience, self-regulate. It One of the biggest benefits is it allows for clear thought, which then leads into our ability to make good decisions, perhaps with a lot of moving parts. It improves team communication and practical intuition. So this is a little bit of the evidence of what actually happens inside of our body with our heart when we're experiencing these various emotions. So on the left-hand side, we see irregular heart pattern, and this is a period of time when we might have been frustrated, irritated, impatient, or worried, or in other words, incoherence. And we know that when we're in that space, that impairs our performance. As opposed to the right-hand side, where we might be incoherence and you can see the nice smooth oscillations. And this ultimately promotes optimal performance. So coherence, feelings of appreciation, calm, patience, and confidence. And so what's important about this is that we can actually see when and how well we're doing because we have a biofeedback device that people can attach to their smartphone that helps them self-regulate. You can do it without, but that's a helpful little tool, and I'll get into that more. So what does HeartMath do? It helps us think more clearly and find better solutions, uh, maintain composure during challenges, improves coordination and reaction times, access to intuitive intelligence, family and social harmony, reduces fatigue and exhaustion, promotes the body's natural regenerative processes, and improves the ability to learn and achieve higher test scores. They've done a lot of research with students and has positive outcomes. So what would happen if we did the same thing with teams? Well, it increases team harmony and coherent communication because we know communication is often where things come apart. It would often promote fewer mistakes and errors, faster and more accurate creative decision making, shorter meeting times, increased positive energy and sense of well-being, collective intuition for increasing creativity and finding solutions to problems, increase that sense of well-being and appreciation of a collective action, a more inclusive perspective, and establishing a new baseline for sustained change. So let's get started. I want to teach you a tool that you will be able to use today and after you leave here. And this tool is called Attitude Breathing Technique. And so the first step is to recognize a feeling or an attitude that you may want to change and identify a replacement attitude. So I'm going to flip over to the next slide to give you a sense. So some suggestions might be, if you were feeling stressed, you might you might focus on ease. If you are anxious, you might focus on calm. If you're overwhelmed, you might focus on peace and ease. So a series of, it's essentially the opposite to what you might be feeling if it's causing you stress. So I'd love it if everybody could just focus on an attitude, and I'm going to walk you through this technique. So once everybody has a technique or has a feeling or an attitude, and I'll use stress, the second step is to focus your attention in the area of your heart. Imagine that your breath is flowing in and out of your heart area or chest. Now you're going to do that, excuse me, just take a drink of water. It's flowing in and out of your heart or chest area. You're going to breathe a little bit slower and a little bit deeper. You're going to breathe in and out through your nose if you can. So you're going to focus your attention in the area of your heart, breathing in and out of your heart or chest area. So for me, I'm going to breathe in that feeling, that new attitude of ease. So heart focus, heart breath, ease. Breathing in and out of your heart area, a little slower, a little deeper. Heart focus, heart breath, ease. Okay. So if you had an experience where you were feeling an attitude that you wanted to adjust, you can practice this just for a couple of minutes. And what you do is you quiet the nervous system. And it allows you to find some of that ability we talked about earlier about clear thought, our ability to make better decisions. And I have a PDF of that, and what I'll do is I'll forward that to Wendy so she can add that to the YouTube as well, so that you can actually print it off. So again, suggestions and opposites that you can reference. So I mentioned a little bit about biofeedback. It's a device that just clips onto your earlobe, and for some people, that social proof, that ability to actually do that monitoring, is really helpful. For some people, it's not necessary. So that's available. We can talk more about that. So HeartMath is one example. There are other examples supporting interventions. And the reason I am, I guess, so enthusiastic about HeartMath is that for the people who are busy delivering whatever services you might have, they may need to practice some techniques while they're on the job. And these other interventions are wonderful, but they may not be available to us at any given moment. So some other supporting interventions: mindfulness, meditation, physical activity, nutrition, sound, massage, humor, and we've got a nice long list here of suggestions that people can use and make choices um, at different points in their well-being journey. So one of the things that I'd like to offer to chamber members, if you'd like to explore options for your business, I would love to book a complimentary call at your convenience to see what might be possible and what I might be able to do to support you on your journey. So these tools, these HeartMath tools, um, work well in teams. They work well in with individuals, and for people who have accessed Petal funding in the past, Petal has financially supported applications from businesses. So, Wendy, I think we're ready for some questions.
All right, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to add them to our chat, and we can have a chat and go over them.
I may have gone too fast.
Definitely gave us a lot to think about, for sure.
Feel free to unmute I'm happy to answer them that way too, if you have any questions. So included on the last slide, I'll just go back, is my email. If anybody has any questions, I also have a website there. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook.
Okay, well, it doesn't look as though we have any questions in the chat.
That's great.
Actually, I do have a question.
Oh, excellent.
I'm just typing it in, but I'll say it.
Okay.
So the data that you were providing from Murnau Chappell, there was a reference to people over 60 not focusing maybe on mental health as much, and kind of the implication that maybe they didn't have as many mental health problems. Is it possible that that age group underreports? Is it possible that maybe they're just not reporting?
I think that's certainly possible. I think they've focused in the workplace, so I'm not sure how much community they've had, and I think it depends on how isolated some of the communities have been. I think we'll see a difference when we get the data, for the next couple of months, because we've been through the second wave and for some areas the third wave, and I think it changes every single month. It's that was just I guess a reflection that the younger people had indicated more. But Patricia, I can send you the link to their reporting. There's a lot of data there, and it's very insightful. Early on, they talked about, one of the things that was really intriguing to me was their data indicated that the people who did the best were the people who stayed in the workplace all along. The people the next group that did the next best were the people who stayed at home, and the people who struggled the most were the ones that straddled the workplace and home. So I don't know what that looks like.
I'd really, really like that. If you could send me the link, it's quite
I will.
interesting. And also the data that suggests that that managers are more likely to have mental health concerns makes absolute sense to me. Like there's been so much to deal with as far as COVID is concerned.
Yeah. And I think the opportunity now is to, do what we can to build our resilience before we move into whatever things look like next. I think that if you remember that graph where we've put lots of pressure on people, as we release that pressure with by administering vaccines and loosening things up, I think people who have undergone a big strain for a long period of time may in fact react to that, if you know what I mean. I know that when I have a lot of things going on, I can really just buckle up for a short period of time, but when the pressure gets released, then my body responds, I guess.
It was an excellent presentation, Barb. Excellent. I
Thank you.
really enjoyed it.
Thank you. So if anybody, please just reach out if you have any questions, and if I can be of any assistance. This is a wonderful time for us to, look at how we're going to have to do things differently, and I really want to be able to help.
Thank you, Barb, for
Right.
sure. So just a reminder to everybody that we will have this added, the recording added to our website. So feel free to share it with your family, friends, anybody who might be feeling stress. If anything if this can help them, it would be great to share that. Just also a reminder that we have an event coming up on Wednesday, March 31st. It's a virtual conversation with the Honorable Erin O'Toole. Title is Securing Our Future, Getting Canadians Back to Work. So please visit our website today if you'd like to register for that. And with that, we'll end things and thank everybody for coming today. And thank you so much, Barb, for the great presentation. And everybody take the time to breathe, I guess.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.